You're listening to Thunderquack Podcast Network. This is the Thunderquack Podcast, the official podcast of Thunderquack Podcast Network, where anything can happen. So strap yourselves in and hold on to your butts. It's Thunderquack time!
Hello and welcome back to the Thunderquack Podcast, the official podcast of thunderquack.com, which you can get early every Tuesday on patreon.com, or you can wait and get it free every Friday on podcast services across the galaxy. This week we're going to be talking about The Force Awakens and ranking it, but before we do that, I am one of your hosts, Michael Cohen.
And I'm your other host, Amanda Gunkin.
So we've been going through Star Wars.
Yeah.
And we're finally into the sequel stuff.
Woohoo!
And it was exciting. I actually sat down and watched it this week. As we were going through them, I had said I didn't watch the original trilogy. I didn't really feel like I needed to. I did watch the prequels because I really needed that refresher. Yeah. But watching The Force Awakens, I was like, oh, I don't think I needed to watch this one either.
Yeah.
I definitely do need to watch The Last Jedi, sort of with this context. But with The Force Awakens, I was like, I know this movie backwards and forwards.
For when I was putting it on, because it basically, as soon as we finished the prequels, I remember having to need a palate cleanser and then watching The Force Awakens. So I've watched it very recently and was like, oh, I wonder if I got through the whole thing. Did I get through the whole thing? And then so I went to go just resume. I was like, I'll just see where I'm resuming. And it was at the Lucas, the opening credits. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I guess I did watch the whole thing through. And I was like, well, I've already got it on. I might as well just watch it again. So I totally did, which I can't do that with a lot of different movies where watch it that consecutively. But it's so fun. It's so fun.
Such a good movie. It's so good.
And it's just light and
it's just kind of
popcorn, snack. It's like a popcorn film.
Well, I just think it's so perfectly Star Wars, but we'll get into detail on that. But before we do, let's jump into an email. This one comes from Sam. And Sam says, "What's up, Mike and Amanda? So I heard you talking about Keanu Reeves getting a role in a Marvel movie. I was wondering whether you want this to happen, which I totally do, and or which role do you think would best fit him? Also, what's your favorite of Keanu's movies? Keep up the great show." And that's from Sam Bunkowski. Keanu in the MCU. So one of the things that we had talked about really, really briefly was that Kevin Feige had said that basically they want Keanu in a Marvel movie, but they're trying to figure out what the right role is. So they've talked to him about a few things, and nothing has quite fit, right? I think there's a lot of stuff coming up. There's a lot of new characters, obviously, that are accessible now with the Fox deal. So I imagine it'll end up being one of those. For me, I would love to see him. The thing about Keanu Reeves is that I really like him when he's kind of unexpected. And one of the things that I love about the MCU, I won't get into any spoilers about Far From Home, but I'll just say that one of the great things that they do with this version of Spider-Man is every movie that he's shown up in, they've done one thing to deviate from classic Spider-Man, and then the rest of it is
classic Spider-Man.
Is classic Spider-Man, right?
That's cool.
So, at the end of Homecoming, they have at the very end, the last scene, they have the reveal of Aunt May discovering that Peter is Spider-Man, which is different from the comics, right?
Yeah.
And then obviously that this isn't spoilers because it's in the trailers and everything, but that plays into the story in Far From Home. And instead of it being Aunt May always worried about, they could have done a very sort of stock boring cliche story of like, oh, I'm so worried about you, oh, your uncle died and now I don't want you to die. Like, they could have done that story, but instead they have her like being his biggest supporter.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, it's like it's in a couple of the trailers, I mean,
Right,
like
okay.
where she's like introducing Spider-Man and stuff like
nice.
that.
Okay, cool.
And there's in the international trailer they had a scene where she's like, don't forget to take your suit on his trip, right? And he's like, and he goes like, oh, I don't want to.
Oh, right. Yeah. I do remember that.
Yeah, so I love that they do that with Spider-Man, because obviously everybody knows Spider-Man so well. Like, let's skip the origin story, let's skip the stuff that we know backwards and forwards, and then on top of that, let's throw in this piece to shake things up and this piece to shake things up. And my hope is that going into the Fantastic Four have already had 2 incarnations, so let's do something different with them. And then the X-Men obviously have had it's like 7 movies or 8 movies or something
so
like
many.
that.
So many.
I mean, if you count all the Wolverine ones, it's even more. So let's shake that story up as well and do something completely different, which they already did with the X-Men ones. I mean, First Class was the attempt to do that, and then Bryan Singer somehow got back in there and just turned it back into his movies again. I don't know how that happened. Like it was like, because I think it's Matthew Vaughn came in and did First Class, and it was like, oh, awesome, breath of fresh air. This movie has a couple of problems, but it's so much closer to X-Men than those other movies were. Like, wow, what a great step forward. This is really great direction. And then he comes in with Days of Future Past and is like, yeah, but remember all of the characters from my X-Men movie? I'm like, yeah, really great casting. Terrible stories, though. Terrible stories. What was Magneto's plan the first time? To turn people into jellyfish or something? I don't know. Yeah, no, it's Magneto. He should be more clever than that. But and it's just they're not good X-Men movies. So my hope is that they come in. What I would really love to see, because I want to see John Krasinski as Reed Richards, the leader of the Fantastic Four. That's been like sort of the fan casting for a long time, and I feel like that is pitch perfect. That he'd be a great like scientist, and I can see him. And my other hope for this stuff is that Spider-Man will be in the first Fantastic Four movie, because Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four have history.
Oh, interesting.
And I could see John Krasinski and Tom Holland having great chemistry on screen of like and Spider-Man's kind of now he's in the market for a new science
mentor,
bro. To geek out with and that sort of thing. So I think it could be a really cool dynamic with the two of them. What I would really love to see with Keanu is Professor X.
Interesting.
Because it would go so counter to Patrick Stewart and James McAvoy. And even though like James McAvoy's portrayal of Professor X is very different from Patrick Stewart's, but they are meant to be the same character, just on 2 alternate timelines.
Yeah.
And if certain things hadn't happened in Days of Future Past, that James McAvoy character would have ended up being the same character, right? But to come in and do something so totally different with that character and have Keanu Reeves just like play a young-ish, but sort of like edgy and a little bit dangerous Professor X, to have, I think, Professor X and Magneto a little bit more on even ground. Of like, that makes it more because Professor X in the classic portrayal, which most people are going to go with the 90s cartoon series, they see sort of a wise old man in a wheelchair, in a hover chair, right? But in the comics, Professor X is a very complex, very dark, very sort of tortured individual. He has the ability to see into everyone's thoughts, essentially on the planet, especially when he uses Cerebro. So he understands the worst
right,
worst parts of human
Yeah.
nature, but he also understands the best parts, right? So that's, I think, where that dichotomy of the X-Men are such a weird concept, because it's like, well, how are we going to defend mutant kind against other mutants as well as humans? Well, we're going to create a fighting force, a paramilitary organization with teenagers, right? Like, it's so weird. It's such an odd thing that, like, Patrick Stewart was pitch perfect casting, right? Like, I mean, like, that's when they were like, we'll make a live action X-Men. Everybody's like, well, it's got to be Patrick Stewart.
He's so good, yeah.
And he is so good. Him and Ian McKellen across from each other. It's such perfect dynamic. And then even McAvoy and Fassbender in First Class is also, like, the chemistry there. That scene with the two of them, and when they're looking out at the radar dish, and he goes into his mind, and they, because Magneto's been using anger to fuel his powers, and then Charles goes into his mind and finds that memory of the Hanukkah candles with his mother and his grandmother, I think. Like, it's his family, right? Like, it's this cherished memory of family that he had basically repressed and forgotten because of World War II. And then they come out of it and they're both crying.
I forgot about that.
And Professor X is like, I didn't know that was, I didn't know you had that inside you. And Magneto is like, I'd forgotten. Like, I thought that I had lost that forever. And it's like that great connection between the two of them. And then the next 3 movies just destroy any of that buildup. It's so awful. Yeah, because that moment is, like, sort of like the heart of those two characters.
Did you watch Dark Phoenix?
No, I don't need to see that movie in order to know that it's a train wreck. No, I saw the trailers. I mean, any movie that gets delayed by like 6 months is not. That's not going to be a good thing.
It's so funny to watch it though, where you're just like, you can see what happened to it. Like, it's one of those great, like, to dissect it and to sort of be like, yeah, it's these things.
That is
like,
one of those things. Having gone through film school, you watch a bunch of movies that. You watch great movies, right?
Yeah.
Like film screenings classes. Mackenzie Gray, who everybody might know as that evil Kryptonian scientist from Man of Steel, as well as the crazy Lex Luthor clone from Smallville, and a million other things across genre TV that gets filmed and movies that get filmed in Vancouver. He was my film screenings instructor. He wasn't really a professor, and we would watch great films and then discuss what makes them great. But I think that it's equally as important in film school to watch train wrecks and go, what happened?
What is
like,
it
let's talk about this. Like, let's go into it. Let's dig in and figure out, where did this movie go wrong? Because I think that that's the more important lesson. And so I'm sure I will watch Dark Phoenix eventually, but I will watch Dark Phoenix when it is free. So on Netflix,
fair. When it's like
something.
somewhere that you can actually like pay attention to it.
Yeah.
I will say it is it's mostly based in characters, and just like when you take these characters and you just make them completely different than what they were, like that it goes completely against their character, where you're like, it makes no sense that Beast would be acting like that. That makes no sense. I know the whole plot of the movie because I did listen to the Kinda Funny in review for Dark Phoenix, knowing I'm not going to watch that movie anytime soon. I'll just listen to this and see what they have to say. I don't remember who said it on that. I think it might have been Tim Geddes who said it. It was either him or maybe it was, I think it might have been Andy Cortez, actually. These movies don't respect themselves enough for the audience to respect them. And that's the thing, is that, like, when First Class comes out and the only nod that it gives, there's 2 nods, I guess, because it uses a little bit of Magneto's backstory to set the stage for his character. But without interfering with anything from the future movies or the like, it doesn't. Yeah, it just sort of does its own thing, but it realizes that it's in the same world as it.
And then the Wolverine cameo, right?
Yeah,
like it does those 2 things, and I guess Mystique is in there, but kind of retcons all of that. But It allows itself to exist in its own space where it doesn't need to be connected to the originals. And that was so genius. And then when Bryan Singer gets involved again with Days of Future Past, that whole movie is just an attempt for him to go like, no, my movies were good too. I didn't do X3. It's not my fault that they went to crap. And then try and
I'm so biased though. I really like Days of Future Past, but I think it's just me because I like just the tone of that movie, and I like the way that they use characters in a new way. Like I just think it was, I don't know.
It for me, Days of Future Past, it's like it is exactly what I said. Like it's the movies don't respect themselves enough for me to respect them.
Fair.
And Days of Future Past is one of, I would say, like the top 3 X-Men stories of all time.
Oh, okay. See,
right?
yeah, I have no like.
And Days of Future Past stars Shadowcat, Kitty Pryde.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
She's the one who goes back in time.
Yeah, that was weird that they replaced it with Wolverine.
And they replaced it with Wolverine because Bryan Singer had an infatuation with Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. Yeah. And the studio has an infatuation with Wolverine. And that's where Marvel Studios wouldn't do that. Right? Like they might
keep it to the
Yeah, they take stories and they reinterpret them, but they take inspiration from. They would never call it Days of Future Past and then change the lead character to the old white guy.
Right. Yeah. Because they respect it too much. Because at its core, it's built around something very substantive.
It's like so. Captain Marvel is a really great example of them doing the exact opposite. Right. Captain Marvel was originally a man. He's a Kree soldier, Marvel. And not only did they choose to make the Captain Marvel film about Carol Danvers, but then they retconned the character of Marvel and made Marvel Annette Bening.
Right, yeah. That's so cool.
That's so counter to the source material, but in a positive direction. They didn't do that because it was going to make them more money to make that choice. They did that because it was right for the story.
Yeah, it made sense that there was this.
Yeah, so they created this dynamic with Marvel.
Plus, Annette Bening is awesome.
Yeah, so it's just, that's the thing. Marvel Studios, Kevin Feige in particular, respects that stuff. He reveres that stuff so much that it's always going to be treated with dignity, right? And the changes that they're going to make are more than likely going to be changes for the better, right? But then with the Fox stuff, it's just like, what can we do to cram as much money-making potential into this film as possible?
Yeah.
And that's where it goes wrong. Even the way that Sony approaches stuff with the Spider-Man property, and the stuff that they still have access to, like making Venom, I believe after having seen that movie, and going into that movie, I was one of the most vocal, like, oh, this is stupid. You can't have Venom without Spider-Man. And then after seeing the movie, I was like, oh, they approached this with the absolute best intentions of like, we have this property. We think it can be successful. Let's try and make a movie about Venom without Spider-Man. How do we do that? Let's solve that problem. And ultimately, I think that they actually pulled it off. I really, really liked Venom.
I watched it through seats when I was on the plane when other people were watching it with the subtitles on. That's how I watched Venom, because I just saw pieces of it. It seems enjoyable enough.
It's a very fun, very silly superhero movie. Yeah. It's, I think the cool thing about Venom is that it much like Venom was counterculture at the time in the early 90s of like, all the superheroes were very, very superhero-y, right? Like they all kind of had the same physique. They all had the same look. Especially if Jim Lee or Todd McFarlane were drawing them, they literally all had the same faces, just with different hair. And then here comes Eddie Brock and Venom as like this counter to Spider-Man, where like Spider-Man's heroic and he's a good guy and he always does the right thing and he's never bad and he's, all that sort of thing. And then here's Venom and he's like, Venom is badass and he'll bite people's heads off, and he's so it's like right now when all of our heroes, except for maybe the MCU stuff, but even with the MCU stuff, there's a few of them in there that it's like they're kind of edgier versions. They're everything else, like especially with the DC stuff, the X-Men stuff, it's like everything's like it's so cool, everything's so awesome, so rad, and all the heroes are anti-heroes. Even Superman's an anti-hero in the DC movies. And then here comes Venom, that original poster boy for anti-hero superhero comics. And it's the movie is ridiculous. Like, it's silly slapstick comedy for most of it, and then it gets into like the grandiose superhero stuff towards the end. But even when it's doing that, there's still so much humor infused to it. And I'm like, yeah, they get it. They got it. Like, Venom is supposed to be counter to whatever the current thing is. So the Venom movie thumbs its nose at all superhero movies. And I'm like, okay, yep, you guys figured it out. It's still a shame that it's not connected to Spider-Man in some way, but I don't know. I have hope that they can retcon that, but... What's your favorite Keanu movie?
Yeah, I was gonna say, because I don't know enough to predict like what I would like him in. Although I do think it would be interesting because he always plays these such like wholesome people that it's like hard to have him. I mean, mind you, I haven't watched John Wick, but the idea of like him playing someone that you actually wind up not liking but then you like get on their side, but who is like definitively a villain. Yeah, I think is kind of interesting because he would make a sympathetic villain. I think is interesting. Classic though, Matrix, man. Like because it was so iconic for like my science fiction awakening was like so much based on the Matrix. That was the first film I ever made myself, was that 67-second like Matrix like contest for the radio or whatever. That was like what I thought of when I moved out to Vancouver and like made my first little thing. It was like the Matrix. But Speed is where I first like sort of saw Keanu, and like I wasn't a Bill and Ted person. That was like before my time.
Like I go straight to Bill and Ted, but to Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, which is the second one, and which is I think by a lot of people on the internet for some reason is considered the worst of the two movies. I think that they're both like good, bad, right? Like like intentionally so. They're both supposed to be B movies. As about two, stoner rock and roll
they're not
teenagers that travel through time and space. Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey is like formative for me. It's one of those movies that like when I think of it, I think of being like, I don't know, I guess like 7 or 8 years old, and renting it or watching it on TV, and so many references in that movie that they are things that like concepts that I was introduced to ideas with that movie.
Oh,
right?
Interesting. Cool.
Like the idea of when they get to heaven and it's not just human beings, like there are other sentient beings from like, so Station is one of the characters that they meet, and Station are these two little aliens, but they're two aliens, but they're one being.
I have never seen Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey.
They die. That's the thing, is that like in the first one they travel through time and meet historical figures. In the second one they die.
Interesting.
And they
go to, I want to watch this now.
They go to hell and then have to get out of hell.
Interesting.
In order to
Oh my god, they just sound so ridiculous. That's such a ridiculous concept. I love it.
They're phenomenally great movies.
I'll have to go and watch it.
Yeah, and they go to heaven and they meet Station, who is an alien from another planet. Yeah. That is, and it's like this weird sci-fi concept of like these two little hairy, big-nosed, like sort of like troll-looking alien things. They're grotesque looking. They're disgusting, but they're also kind of adorable. But they're one consciousness between the two of them. Nice. And it's like, I'm like my little 8-year-old brain was like, what is all of this? Like, I just trying to incorporate all of those ideas of like
into one thing. Yeah.
Okay, it's heaven. everybody is in heaven, ancient whatever, historical figures and blah blah blah. But then like also aliens would be in heaven too. I guess so, if heaven is a real thing and aliens were also real, that good aliens would go to heaven, wouldn't they? Doesn't that? And it's like so for
make your brain think about it
for a little kid to be like what, and then on top of it, it's hilarious. So like it's one of those things where I always say that, like, if you can be entertaining. Yeah. People will learn things through an entertaining story rather than just trying to be educational about something. So like that's one of those things that like got me to think about some really high concept philosophy without realizing that that's what I was doing.
Jumping on this Keanu train, it was really great. I followed the CBC and some other things, and they dredged up some classic Keanu like CBC tapes. Yeah, which is really great. He had some sort of, speaking of educational, he had some sort of educational thing where he totally talks, but in like a radical way, like because it's like the 80s, and he's like, but it is really great. I would just say the best part about Keanu Reeves is that people constantly forget that he's Canadian. And it's it's like hard to forget. I will say also too, for The Matrix, that Carrie-Anne Moss was also Canadian. Yep. And I just think that movie having two Canadians, it like would almost qualify for Capco.
If only they had shot it here, right? Yeah. Cool. Keanu Reeves.
We talked so much about Keanu. Thank you for that email.
Well, we talked a lot about the X-Men as well.
That's fair.
Okay. Let's jump into some news. The Mulan teaser came out. Did you watch it? What do you think?
I mean, I'm excited. The teaser, because all the teasers are different in different ways, the teaser told me nothing about all the things they're not including in the Mulan movie. So I found out about it, like not having Mushu and all that stuff, from like the people talking about it on the internet. So, I mean, as a fan of Asian historical dramas, I am intensely drawn to the overall concept of Mulan. It's the first one I think that we're getting that is not a remake. It is a reimagining. And I think that that's the difference in what we're thinking about for this like era of Disney remakes. This won't be a remake. It'll be a reimagining. Whereas everything else has very much been a remake. Like Aladdin was a remake. Cinderella was a remake. Beauty and the Beast. Like there's nothing really that distinguishes them aside from the fact that they're live action from the original Disney classics. And Mulan, I think, will be the first one.
There will or will not be songs.
I've been hearing that there will not be songs.
Yeah. So Mulan is in my top 5.
Interesting.
Disney animated features, and visually, it's one of the most amazing ones. I mean, it's from that era, which is Mulan and Tarzan came out right after the other. It's sort of in the era of when they were figuring out how CG works into the 2D stuff, and they hadn't moved into full CG yet. And obviously they perfected it with Tarzan, which is one of the reasons why Tarzan is my favorite.
Tarzan is 3D?
No, they perfected the melding
the integration.
Of 2D
I was
and
like,
3D.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of 3D in Tarzan, and it's all the backgrounds, right? All of the background, foreground elements and everything are all CG. Right. With the way that they did it in that one is they basically created the models, and then they had the background painters basically paint on the 3D models. So they're amazing special features that have not been re-released. They were on there was like a crazy special edition DVD that had it was like 3 discs back when
that was
3-disc DVD was a really
big
deal. And there were hours and hours of footage on it of them going into the process of how they made it. None of that stuff's made it onto the Blu-rays, but Mulan was very similar. It's 98 and then 99, right? And Mulan had some of the best CG at that time. So like the avalanche and stuff like that whole scene is full of CG.
I am so mad at younger me for not, because now working in the field and being like, now I can recognize it when I watch it, but I haven't gone back and watched Mulan since I've been working in animation, so I don't know to notice those things. Because the only thing I have watched since is going back and watching Beauty and the Beast Enchanted Christmas and being like, what is this 3D element in this 2D movie? And because now I can see it, but now I want to go back and rewatch Mulan.
Beauty and the Beast was the first one to have a 3D element in it, and it's the ballroom,
the piano
scene.
Yeah, the Tim Curry's character?
No.
Oh, you mean in actual
the
Beauty
original
and the Beast.
Beauty and the Beast,
Okay.
the ballroom for like the title song for
Right,
Beauty and the
okay.
Beast is
A
like
3D.
that whole sequence is 3D except for the characters.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah. Yeah, and so everything kind of Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, like everything from Beauty and the Beast forward has at least one element in it. So in Aladdin, it's the Cave of Wonders is 3D, like his like the face.
Oh, yeah, that
the
makes
lion
total
head.
sense.
And
yeah,
then
yeah, yeah.
inside it, when they're escaping, the lava is all 3D elements. And then in the Lion King, it's the wildebeest stampede.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and then, well, maybe not everything has something. I'd have to go through it because what's after the Lion King?
I don't
Pocahontas.
know. Yeah, I don't know.
It's been so long since I've watched Pocahontas.
Oh, I love Pocahontas though. That was one of my favorites as a kid.
But my hope
Like-
is that with like that they're gonna go in two directions with this. That you've got the like you're saying, you've got the Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, Lion King that are all remakes. It's like, oh, these are live action versions of the original movies. And then I hope that with Mulan, they can take Mulan, they can take The Hunchback of Notre Dame, they can take Tarzan and Pocahontas, and they can go in a different direction with them and do something that's a little bit more like historical, but still have some of that Disney magic in it. Like I really hope that's the thing that I would worry about, is that you remove the fantastical creatures, you remove the music. At what makes this a Disney movie now, right?
Yeah.
Like now it's just, if it's just a historical drama about
what makes it
Mulan,
Disney, right?
Yeah, what makes it Disney? You're like, where is the Disney magic in it? That's not to say that they can't still have Disney magic in that story, but it's very beautiful. And it's obviously a very important story to retell now. And it was an important story in 1998 to tell.
My friends,
But
we were talking about it yesterday at brunch, and they made us Google it. Buddy was like, it's like one paragraph of text. And we're like, no, it's not. It's more than that. And then my friend was like, oh, it's a page. Like, he looked it up. It's like the original story is only a page.
Yep.
So it's the idea of going back to source material. Really, there wasn't a ton there. And so melding the two of them.
well, it's
there's-
folklore, right?
but,
So
yeah,
like
it's
there's like the written text is one page, but then
it's
there
like how
are
it's-
other stories that people tell about Mulan, right?
The thing for me for Mulan is that it never was a musical one for me. Like the song "Let's Get Down to Business" or whatever, that one, "Make a Man Out of You."
Man out of you, yeah.
So is really one of the only Disney songs that I constantly listen to, like on
Yeah.
rotation, because it's just like it always gets stuck in my head, because every time somebody says "Let's get down to business," you automatically have to sing
To
the
defeat
song.
the Huns.
So it's the only one that I really know, and then Reflection because of the Christina Aguilera thing, that it was like her song. But I don't think that.
What about
I
"True
would
to Your
miss-
Heart" sung by NSYNC and Stevie Wonder?
No, I wouldn't miss
love that
any of
song.
the other songs in Mulan.
Yeah.
So when I think of Mulan, I don't think of the songs. So
Oh,
that's
really?
the one thing where I'm kind of like, it actually will be okay for me.
"A Girl Worth Fighting For" is such a great song too.
Oh, that's a cute one, but it's again,
such
it's not
great
it's
song.
not a thing that.
But
I
that's it. That's the thing, is that that movie has a very specific turning point, and it's literally at the end of that song. And it's even when you listen to the soundtrack version of it, it's in the song, where it's like they're marching off to battle, like
right,
it's
yeah, and then it
literally a
becomes
lyric.
like a
And it's like do-do-do-do-do. And it's like all happy, and everybody's singing their song about these pretty girls that they got back home. And Mulan has her one line of like, "What about a girl who speaks her mind?" And then they're like, "Nah." And then they're going into the end of the song, and they come around the corner in the past, and they see the village that's been destroyed by the Huns. And that's when the movie switches, and then there's no songs in the rest of the movie until the very end. And then we get "True to Your Heart" at the very end, basically over the credits. Right. And it's because like it's at that point that it's like, oh yeah, that's right, the Huns are conquering China, and they've murdered this entire village. And Mulan picks up a little doll that clearly belonged to a child, and it's like, yeah, that kid is dead. This Disney movie just got real dark real fast. And whenever I watch it, I'm always kind of like, even though I know it's coming, I'm always shocked at that point. That's where I'm a little bit worried of like, if you're starting in a historical drama place, when you get to that scene,
it's different. It's like a
what's this movie going to be rated? PG-13?
Ooh, probably.
Yeah, so it'll be a little bit worried, but yeah.
But I don't know that much about it. I'm kind of like excited. I don't know about like the actual casting or anything like that really, aside from like the trailer and what people have sort of been talking about. Like I don't know if Mushu for sure isn't in it.
I don't know that it's officially
I don't think it's official,
announced.
but I just know that people are contemplating that they won't be in it.
Yeah.
Ooh, this is interesting. When you look at the casting, it really is only I can only find what is Donnie Yen in it? Do you know?
I think is he not Shen? Who's playing Shen?
Maybe. I love Donnie Yen. I'm very excited. I don't know. I don't know who any of them are, but because I haven't really looked at the casting that much for it. I've just sort of just watched the trailer.
A pro tip for people who are fans of Mulan: look up in the Chinese version. Jackie Chan voiced Shen, and
interesting.
And Jackie Chan is also a pop star in China, right? Like he has like 10 albums or something like that, and they're all like award winning, like top 10, like Billboard, whatever the Chinese Billboard.
This very good looking man is Chen.
Okay.
Who is this?
Yeah,
this is fun. Sorry, I went down a rabbit hole.
That's all right.
Who's Sketch?
I don't know.
And Po and Ling.
Po and Ling. Po is the fat one, and no.
Oh, the funky the
other three soldiers.
Right.
Which one's Po and which one's Ling?
I don't know.
Yeah, Ling is the skinny one.
Okay.
Po is the big fat Buddha looking one.
Yeah.
And then it's what is it? Sketch?
Sketch, yeah.
He must be the Harvey Fierstein, the short, gruff looking one with the squinty eye.
Maybe.
But there's a version of Make a Man Out of You sung by Jackie Chan, and it is far superior. The downside is that it's in Mandarin or something. Like so I don't know, like I can't sing along to it, but he's actually a very, very good singer. It's kind of weird because we think of him as martial arts master.
I'm going down the rabbit hole of filmography right now. I'm trying to hold my phone away from the. I should just flag people, like, if I'm using my phone, if that's causing feedback, let me know. I'm trying to be really good about like not messing up the microphones. I just do want everybody to know that Mike totally blamed me for the feedback, and he said I wasn't allowed to use my phone. I didn't blame you. It was specifically on your microphone. Okay, fine. And the only thing that we could imagine is that it was probably me just texting during the podcast. It's likely a cause of interference. Yes. Probably. I mean, I would also blame me. It makes a lot of sense that that's what it would be. Yeah. But anyways, I'm not texting right now. I'm looking up the cast of Mulan. That's fine. Totally relevant for the podcast. But wait, Donnie Chen isn't in when I actually click on it. Donnie Yen, sorry. He's just in the first overview when I Google it. Maybe he's not in it. Anyways, I know nothing. Title of this podcast. Sorry. But anyways, Mulan, overall, it'll be interesting to see where it evolves to. Yeah. So. Yeah, and they play these so close to the vest. Like with Lion King, we still haven't even really seen all that much, and it comes out next week. It's getting very, very poor reviews, and I'm disappointed about that. Oh, dear. But, because people probably aren't expecting it to be just the Lion King in 3D animation. That's what it will be. From the clips that I have seen, it's very sterile. Yeah. It's like very like it's real lions. Yeah, it looks like a real lion that they've just made lip sync to Donald Glover, and it's like it's not behaving in an animated fashion. It's not, there's not really a lot of character coming through. It's not really emoting. And but the thing, you're saying that as if like, yeah, of course, but they like Jon Favreau made Jungle Book a few years ago and it was not like that. Okay. Like all of the characters in that movie were very expressive. Like it was, like Jungle Book is fantastic. So I don't understand why this one has such a sort of like, there's a reverence for this that there doesn't have on Jungle Book. No, that's how you feel because you are a 90s kid. I mean, and you think that they started making Disney movies at The Little Mermaid. But to animation fans as well as to people who are older than 30,
The Jungle Book is a classic,
Yeah, okay.
and it is very, very highly regarded. It's one of the best animated features by Disney by a long shot. And it's also Rudyard Kipling's story is like it's a classic piece of literature. So, yeah, no, I think that actually the Jungle Book probably deserves more respect than The Lion King, which is a bastardization of Hamlet. Okay. So,
fair.
And like, come on, Jonathan Taylor Thomas, like,
oh, the best. You're hurting all my childhood right now. You know who I just found on Twitter was Devin Sawa, because he was saying something sassy about liberals.
Yeah.
Or about conservatives. I don't know, something. It was good. And then I was like, hey, Devin Sawa existed. And his anyways, it's interesting to see people that were like, I don't know what Jonathan Taylor Thomas is doing right now, but I feel like
he disappeared.
It would be interesting to follow him.
I think he intentionally disappeared. I don't think I don't think his career fell apart. I'm pretty sure that he decided to retire from acting. Yeah. But let's move on to the next piece of news. The Sith Trooper was revealed last week. And people may have missed this. It was basically revealed as an exclusive for Comic-Con that there are going to be like action figures and stuff that are going to be available at Comic-Con. But this is a new stormtrooper that's in The Rise of Skywalker. And it's the name is the most important part. The way it looks really cool. It's a red stormtrooper.
I mean, it looks really cool. It's literally exactly what it sounds like.
Well, no, I mean, like, again, to you, but like
I'm not an art person. I know.
A real Star Wars fan. To a real Star Wars fan.
That can tell pointedly make fun of my lack of art skills.
If I put up a stormtrooper, a scout trooper, a snow trooper, and a clone trooper,
I can tell the difference between those.
Could you?
Yes.
Are you sure?
I mean, maybe not clone trooper versus stormtrooper, but definitely the other ones.
So to people who actually care about that stuff, it is a very nice looking stormtrooper.
I can definitely tell the difference between the other ones.
Okay, well the new armor is vastly different from any other stormtrooper that's come before it. Like it's a very new design. So
sorry, what's the stormtrooper, clone trooper?
What did I say? I mean, like, you want me to list through all of them?
How many troopers
there
are there?
like 30 different types at this point.
Okay, yeah. I couldn't label 30 different types of stuff.
I mean, like, there are like 30 different types of clone troopers alone. But I could say, like,
that's the one that's in Jedi, and that's the one that's in Hoth, and that's the one that's in... Because there is, like, a winter one, right?
Yes. Snow troopers.
Snow troopers. That one. Yeah, see, that's what you said.
Yeah. Anyways, so it's a new set of armor that looks great. But the notable part is the name, is that they're Sith Troopers.
I don't understand. Isn't Sith this very specific kind of like anti-Jedi?
Well, exactly. And what does that mean for Kylo Ren? Does this have to do with the Emperor coming back? Like, are they the Emperor's troopers, but they're First Order?
So is it like
Sith Troopers?
Is it like troopers for the Sith Lord as opposed to them being Sith troopers?
I guarantee they are not themselves Sith because there can only be two Sith, right? Like, that's the whole deal.
But it would totally mess with everybody's mind if there was then a bunch of Sith troopers.
Yeah, it wouldn't make a lot of sense, but yeah, because you have to, it's like a Sith being a Sith is like being a Jedi. You have to be trained, right? Yes. Like, and that it wouldn't work because the First Order troopers are indoctrinated, and
I really love how I just sense. Like stirred it up, and you're like, wait, let me logic this away.
But it doesn't make any sense, right? Because the First Order stormtroopers, we just watched the Force Awakens.
Put on stormtrooper armor because he wants to fit in with his other army people.
Yeah, but it would be
I'm just trolling you now at this point.
It would be such a lame story point. Like that would be them just like pulling something out of left field to be like, and now a surprise, the Sith are back and there's thousands of them. Like, that would be stupid. More than likely they are like Kylo Ren has decided that he is now a Sith
and needs troopers.
Yeah, because Snoke was keeping him sort of on the line between the light side and the dark side intentionally. Like, the whole idea there was that if he could use both sides without succumbing to either, then he would be more powerful. Right. And that's what Snoke was kind of berating him about in The Last Jedi.
Right.
Is like this idea of like of like, oh, now you're like you want to be such a like the Darth Vader thing, you want to be a Sith Lord, but that's dumb.
Right.
And then like you love your father, so like that's the light side. That's dumb too. You need to be better than both of those things and walk the line.
Right.
Like he does, right? But now without Snoke's influence,
is he gonna go
Kylo Ren being a Darth Vader fanboy is gonna say that he's now a Sith Lord, right? Yeah. Is he a Sith Lord? Are these actually Sith Troopers? Like that'll kind of, I think, be the thing.
Yeah.
Of like, well, they're not really the Sith because how is he a Sith other than saying that he is?
Yeah.
Right. Unless he has a Sith holocron and all of a sudden he has a bunch of Sith knowledge, and that's entirely possible, but we don't know any of that yet. Yeah. So what we have from the two previous movies and some of the sort of ancillary stuff is like that's more than likely the way that this is going. But the idea that the Sith are returning again is an interesting element, and it goes towards a lot of what I've been saying about where this movie's gonna leave it. The balance is with
1 and 1, right? Isn't that what you?
No, what I've been saying is that like no, this has nothing to do with Star Wars storytelling. This has to do with Disney making money off of the Star Wars franchise. They're not going to wrap things up in this movie. If people think that Rise of Skywalker is going to put a tidy bow on the entire Star Wars saga, it's not. It's going to put things back into galactic conflict that can go on for however many movies they want to make. Right? I'm
so excited. What a brave new era.
Yeah,
love it.
So it's like I believe that the end of
Star Wars till I die
is going to be Rey. And I believe that the idea of the title Rise of Skywalker has to do with like the new Jedi Order are going to be called Skywalkers.
Yeah, I think that's really cool.
And Kylo Ren is going to go create his Sith Order or whatever, and they're going to have their battle, and maybe the two of them will have some sort of a finality to their story. It's entirely possible that Kylo Ren could die in this one. But he's got his Knights of Ren who maybe Sith acolytes now, like they may have changed the title and whatever, right? But one of those characters may step forward to be the new leader of the Sith, and now there will be like an ongoing conflict between the Jedi and the Sith, so that they can keep telling stories and keep making money off of movies and comic books and video games, because there's only so many times you can go back to the well of what happened between episode 3 and episode 4. And I'm getting super sick of it. Like, Jedi Fallen Order looks like a really cool video game, but the story's going to be hot garbage because it's not going to make any sense. The Jedi were exterminated, except that the Jedi were exterminated. 5, 6, maybe 7 Jedi can survive that extermination. Not like 200. And because every time they go to tell a story between 3 and 4, it's like, except this Jedi who also survived the Order 66. And it's like, just stop. Like, knock it off with this nonsense. Because there's Obi-Wan and Yoda, obviously. But then there's also Kanan Jarrus. And there's also Ahsoka Tano, who's technically not a Jedi, but she still manages to escape the Jedi Purge. Right? And now there's this new kid that he's also a Jedi, that he was a Padawan that survived Order 66, and it's like it just drives me nuts because every 6 months we find out about a new character who survived.
So I have a question for you, because this bothers me in storytelling. We'll get back to the news. This is going to be such a long podcast, but how would you feel if, like, in the similar way to the Andromeda, the video game, the N7 video game,
Mass Effect Andromeda?
Mass Effect Andromeda, that they like jumped ahead into a different universe, but it's still in the same like world. How would you feel if Star Wars did that? If they just like jumped ahead?
Well,
like,
that's my expectation. That's my expectation, is that we'll
they'll set something up and then we'll come in 2,000 years.
The Benioff and Weiss story will more than likely be in the past. Right, it'll be Knights of the Old Republic. That's what everybody expects.
Cool.
And then I believe that the Rian Johnson story, that his movie and then subsequent trilogy, he's only directing the first one, so he's directing one and then producing the other two in his trilogy. I believe that his story will be set sometime in the future, and stuff that he set up in The Last Jedi will sort of be realized in that. The idea that and I mean, like, this is also what J.J. Abrams set up in The Force Awakens. We'll get into that. Is that the Force, it's not like, yes, midichlorians, blah, blah, blah. It all, that all fits in as well. But it's not like a Jedi doesn't have to go find some kid and teach him how to be a Jedi in order for him to be able to use the Force. Anakin Skywalker could use the Force naturally without being taught. Rey can use the Force naturally without being taught. Luke could use the Force naturally without being taught, right? Like, if you're strong enough, your connection to the Force is strong enough and it gets nurtured, you develop those skills. That little kid at the end of The Last Jedi pulling the broom to him, same thing. And I think that Rian Johnson's trilogy will be about that same idea. And it's like, people became Jedi. Like, the Jedi Order didn't just manifest because one person went, I think the Force. And then everybody like created a doctrine around it. There in other Star Wars stories, official George Lucas Star Wars stuff in the Clone Wars, there are other cultures around the Force, right? There's the Night Sisters, there's the Wills, which we learn about towards the end of the Clone Wars. And then we learn more about the Guardians of the Wills in Rogue One and in some of the stories that surround that, like the novels and stuff.
What is that? Sounds so interesting.
The two guys that they meet.
Donnie Yen.
Chirrut and Baze. They're Guardians of the Wills. The Wills were like ethereal beings that were connected to the Force. Yoda goes to a weird pocket dimension and meets them.
Oh, how cool!
That's why Yoda knows how to become one with the Force and become a ghost, and he teaches Obi-Wan.
Oh, how cool!
So there are other, and there's a character in Star Wars Rebels called the Bendu, and he's very specifically talks about the idea that there are other paths to the Force.
So it's not just about the Jedi, right?
The Jedi and the Sith are actually like the worst examples of it because they're constantly they're two extremes and they're constantly at war with each other, right? Like, they are actually a sign that the Force is out of balance. So when the Jedi and the Sith rise, because like they just go back and forth between each other fighting, right? So like that idea and Anakin killing everybody and then there being no Force-related conflict for 20, 30 years might actually lend itself to the idea that he did balance the Force because it went back to a natural order instead of these Jedi flipping around with lightsabers and Sith flipping around with lightsabers killing other people, right? Unfortunately, it left two Sith at the top of the galactic political order and they did terrible things, but like it's closer to balance than during the Clone Wars at least. So or during the Sith Wars that predated that stuff. So
cool.
Like there's a lot of ideas in there, but I think that that's kind of what we'll see is so something about some other type of Jedi Order, or the future of the Skywalker Order, if that's what ends up happening. I think that's what we'll see with his story.
That's cool.
Cool. What
that
else
was like our
do we have?
second piece of 7 news items.
The Russo brothers might be teasing a Community movie reveal at Comic-Con this week. So by next week we'll know
if that's true.
We'll know if that happened or not. They posted some stuff. They posted a thing with the date for I think this Thursday or Friday. That they're doing a panel. And the background, like there was it's basically just like a black screen with yellow text, and then there was some like background audio on it of a panel, but the panel for the first thing that they posted was the Infinity War panel from a few years ago, and then they posted a second one of these with the time 11 a.m. And the background audio to that was Troy and Abed rapping the Biblioteca
nice. I
rap
love that
from season 1.
It's so good.
And that got people to thinking like,
is there going to be a Community movie? Because that's going to be so cool.
6 seasons in a movie, right? Like hashtag 6 seasons in a movie. That was the whole thing. Well,
and if anybody could do it, the Russos could do it.
Yeah, and Dan Harmon a few years ago said that he was writing it, that he wrote it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, like, it would be fantastic if they came and they
could probably, and they're not big enough. The biggest one that you'd have to worry about is Donald Glover, but he seems like he really liked it and probably would go back for a Community movie.
I think that you could get him back for the movie, if only for like a cameo sort of thing at the beginning. Well, I would hope that he would be throughout it, but the best thing is that the series ends with Annie going off to her internship at the FBI. Oh. So I really want it to come back and for it to be like that somebody was murdered at the university. And that Annie is the FBI investigator and she has to come back and solve this crime. And for some reason, like, that brings back it all, like, kind of like how the Veronica Mars movie happened.
Oh yeah, where it like brought
but like, I kind of want them to do it because, like, let's be honest, the Veronica Mars movie sucks.
Don't be so harsh.
It's pretty bad.
I don't know what people expected. It's Veronica Mars in movie format.
But
they
the
made
show
it for
was
$4
so
million.
good. Yeah.
So, anyways,
the story doesn't have to suffer. Story isn't contingent on budget.
Fine.
Especially for something like Veronica Mars. Yeah. Like, your mystery better be a good mystery, and that was not. Not
to be confused with the television show is Rocks. So yes.
Yeah, the TV show rocks, and it's coming back. There's
I'm excited.
a new season.
Hulu,
so
right?
Yeah. And I think Crave in Canada. But I hope that if they are doing it and that it has something to do with that they basically, like, that Annie's whole character is just one big send up to Veronica Mars, because Dan Harmon, I think, he probably would revere Veronica Mars. It's a great show, right? He would respect it. And I think he does, but it would be great if they made fun of it the way that they make fun of everything else. They make fun of Star Wars. They make fun of action movies and Alien.
I'm excited to see. That would be fun. It would be fun.
Yeah,
it'd be fun.
I hope that it's happening.
I don't know if I watched the last season of Community, because now when you're saying that Annie goes off to an internship at the FBI, I do not remember that.
Oh, really?
So maybe I need to watch it.
2 other pieces of news that we're gonna get into this one really, really quick. Supergirl got a new costume for season 5 of Supergirl. It looks really cool. She has pants.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's a great really looking suit. It looks a lot more like a Man of Steel Superman or New 52 Superman. It doesn't really look like a lot of other Supergirl costumes. Yeah. It's a very unique Supergirl costume.
I love that Supergirl's still killing it.
But it looks great. Yeah. I have not watched, like, I watched like the first maybe 10 episodes. Well, I guess I did. I watched the first 10 episodes of this season because I watched up until the crossover, and then I haven't watched the rest. I just finished Flash like last week-ish, 2 weeks ago. I finished it right before we did the live stream.
Oh, right.
That morning. And so now that that's done, I'll either go back and watch Supergirl or go back and watch Legends. One or the other. Cool. But yeah, I have about the same number of episodes for each, I think. But Supergirl last season, from what I did watch, I was enjoying. It's a good show. So I'm glad that she's getting pants and won't freeze to death in cold Vancouver weather in a skirt. But cool. Bond 25. This is, I guess, kind of the biggest news in the last couple weeks, right? It's kind of,
I guess I don't know very much about it because I literally just like heard about it on the radio as I was coming here, and then wasn't actually around for them to talk much about it. Yeah. But I mean, you can start it.
I can't remember the name of the actress that's playing. Here we go. Moneypenny? Lashana Lynch. It was announced, I guess yesterday as of recording, that she's gonna be playing 007. Yeah. Now, the important thing here is that she's not playing James Bond. She's playing Agent 007 in this new James Bond movie. I don't watch these movies. I watched Casino Royale and literally fell asleep when they started playing poker for 45 minutes. So, I have no interest. I've never been a huge James Bond fan, but if I am going to watch a James Bond movie, I'm going to watch a Sean Connery one. Right. And failing that, maybe a Pierce Brosnan one. But
I mean, Daniel Craig is so pretty.
He's great. I love Daniel Craig. Great. I like him in other stuff, but I don't like the pacing or the content. Like, here's the honest truth. If I'm going to watch a James Bond movie, I'm going to watch the Kingsman movies.
Oh, yeah. Because they're
that's
like
what I
James
want,
Bond, but
right?
better.
Yeah, that's what I want is like, I want silly gadgets and I want intense action sequences that are ridiculous. Not, I don't like, I understand. I'm not saying that they're bad movies. I'm just saying it's not what I want. It's not the flavor that I want from something like that.
Yeah.
But I also don't want the Pierce Brosnan stuff, which is campy.
Oh yeah, so terrible,
right?
Terrible.
So
The biggest thing is for me is over the last 5 years or whatever, the biggest conversations about James Bond has been about Idris Elba and everybody wanting Idris Elba to be the next James Bond.
Yeah.
So this is really cool to see them be like, wait, you wanted a black James Bond? How about a black female James Bond?
Yeah.
But not actually James Bond, so you can't get mad.
Yep.
And now it's just gonna be 007. That is like the coolest thing that they could have sort of.
So one of the things that I heard from somebody on Twitter is the idea that in the last movie, I guess he was like walking away from that life. Like he was done with it or whatever.
Yeah. But he's still in this one.
He's
like,
apparently
that's the thing,
he's still
right?
in
like
it.
It's still Daniel Craig is still James Bond.
So I think this one will literally be a passing of the torch of like James Bond saying to the new 007, like working with the new 007, which will be Lashana Lynch, and like giving the sort of approval of like, okay, you carry things on from here now. I'm gonna go retire, which lends itself to the idea that James Bond, like 007, has always been a title,
right? Like
there's a potential that all of them have been James Bond 007 at one point or another, and like James Bond is an identity that they take on.
Yeah.
Right, and that they all started somewhere else and then became James Bond 007. Yeah. But yeah, Lashana Lynch, people might remember from Captain Marvel. She is her wingman. I can't remember names today.
I don't know who you're trying to guess, so that's why I can't help. But like I have all.
Have you not seen Captain Marvel?
Oh yeah, sorry. Which one?
Her wingman.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, I don't know.
That she comes back and her best friend.
Right. Is Rami Malek in this movie too?
Maria Rambeau. That's
cool.
Rami Malek is apparently the bad guy.
Nice.
So I don't know. It'll be interesting. It's more controversy. I mean, the last time that we recorded an episode, we talked about The Little Mermaid casting news. So
okay, I have to say, I love this podcast for stuff like this, that I had no idea that it was going to be in the same way, because literally I found out that The Little Mermaid was black on our podcast when I got mad that they were trying to cast Melissa McCarthy and then was like, oh, this is great then. And then the week afterwards sort of being like, weird how the internet reacts to things. And you're like, why? You have energy to expend elsewhere. Yeah. And like, she's a mermaid. Like, she could be whatever color they decide to make her. Like,
yes, I hate to break it to you, but fish people are made up.
Yeah,
they are not real.
That is not a thing that you're appropriating in any way.
That
is fake.
Yeah, the idea that there's cultural appropriation going on there with mermaid kind.
Yeah, but also with James Bond, who is also a made up person. So it's really interesting. I'm excited to see. Like this shifting current that genuinely seems to be sticking. Like these big franchises are going out there and being like, nope, this is what we're doing now. And I think it's like, I feel like it's paying off. Like there's people that are watching movies, right? It doesn't matter. Yeah. Right. And even sometimes because of changes to the status quo. So.
It's just, I mean, like, honestly, it's art mimicking reality. Right. Yeah. And in reality, it's actually 49-51 split between men and women. Yeah. And people come in all shapes, sizes, and colors. Mm-hmm. So let's just go ahead and represent that in film and television. More interesting movies. Yeah. And comic books and video games and whatever, right? Like, let's just have it be more reflective of what real life is like. I think where that gets really difficult is if you live in the middle of a North American country, that is less true, right? So I mean, like, even us growing up in Penticton, I mean, like, think about how white Penticton was, right? I don't know what the makeup of it would be now, but I mean, like, it was really white when we were there.
Especially depending on where you are demographically in cities, right? Or in small towns like that specifically, because catchment areas for elementary schools, so much of it is based on like socioeconomic stratification as well. And in small towns, that tends to also be based in color. So it's just really, really interesting.
Yeah. So I think that if you live in the middle of, I'm not picking on anybody, I'm just saying randomly, like if you live in the middle of Missouri and your social stratas are structured in the way that they are, and then you start seeing characters that don't represent you and the people around you, or represent people differently than the way that the people around you are represented, then you're going to feel alienated by that, right? But I think the important part of that is that we always talk about genre storytelling in this way, that it's a really great gateway into concepts of equality and understanding and all of that sort of thing. So it's a good opportunity to share with people in the middle of the country that the whole world is not as homogenous as maybe their area might be. And that there are other cultures out there, and that those other cultures are interesting and valid in the same way that your own is. And I think like the pendulum kind of has to swing one way in order for it to come back into the middle a little bit. And the hope is that eventually the pendulum feels like it's swinging wildly from one side to the other at the moment, but it's also being propelled, right? Like there are forces whacking it back and forth. The hope is that eventually the pendulum loses momentum and just settles right in the middle, right? And at that point, everybody can just be cool and just appreciate one another.
That'll happen in our lifetime.
I don't think so.
Are we more likely to kill ourselves off or reach equality? And I feel like...
I mean, I think the way that the planet is going, I think that within the next couple of generations, there's going to be some real hard choices that people are going to have to make. And I think that one of two things happens in that. Either race becomes irrelevant because everything is about survival, or things get so difficult that the only way to survive is through tribalism, and tribalism creates barriers, right? Like it creates gulfs between different groups of people, and
you just get a war.
Looking different is the easiest way to distinguish between two tribes. So historically, human beings have not been the greatest about tribalism and the dynamic there, and we've in fact exterminated entire species as a result, not to mention entire races of our own species, in order to be dominant. And realistically, that's probably the way that it goes. Because humans tend towards chaos. It's not that humans tend towards chaos. We're animals, just like any other primate that we share ancestral connection to, and we evolved in a very specific way for very specific reasons. We can see color so that we can distinguish ripe fruit from unripe fruit, because eating unripe fruit makes you sick and then you die, right?
But isn't there like more things talking about now how the idea of like I don't want to let's steer away from this topic very quickly. But the idea of like making yourself less vulnerable by making sure that your genetic pool is as broad as possible, that is definitely something that evolutionarily speaking, we're tending towards wanting to do that more often, to be able to like cover ourselves from any gamut of things.
Yeah, we should do that, and that is beneficial in terms of evolution.
So if we're talking about if we're gonna go back to talking about
that's evolution moving forward. Where we came from is a place of eyes that are designed to distinguish between things, and a brain that's designed to categorize danger and safety. Right? So if
other and like us and them.
If you put together categorization with the ability to distinguish colors, what happens is we see different people with different colored skin and we categorize them together. And that's why there's a natural inclination towards seeing a white person with a black person as a couple and going, is that okay? Right? Like, and just, and like thinking that, and it's like an instinctual thing. And I think that a lot of people nowadays from a young age get taught that that it's not okay to think that way, and that, you know, like interracial relationships are perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
I always forget
and like
that
you're saying,
really,
it's actually technically beneficial.
Yeah, or whatever you want to say. But the idea that I always forget that too, because for my generation, it's never been an issue. But that stupid like movie Loving or whatever, that was like this idea that you forget that interracial relationships were banned like within my parents' lifetime ago. Maybe not in Canada, because I don't actually remember what the.
But like, even when we were kids, I mean, like there's
terrible.
There was a oh man, is it? I think it was Blossom. I think it was Joey Lawrence's character, who am I remembering that right? It was one of that, like it was that era of shows. And it was like, he was on a date with a black girl, and he was super conscious about it, and something happens while they're on their date, and he like basically gets up in the restaurant and like starts berating everybody in the restaurant of like, yeah, I'm on a date with her and there's nothing wrong with it, and all you people looking at us, and like obviously she gets really like uncomfortable and is like, well, you're making this worse than it, like just ignore those people. And he's like, yeah, but I don't want to ignore it because it's, you know, so that's in our lifetime, right? Like that's something that was geared at our generation that needed to happen. So I do think that it was still part of the conversation. I definitely think that for Kara's generation it'll be less so, right? That idea. And I mean, like living in a city like Vancouver, I think that she'll have a very different perspective anyways, but because it's very metropolitan and it's very much
that's the biggest thing,
cultural
is like
mosaic,
that there is a distinct difference between the experiences of people in cities and the experience of people in small towns. And it's just like the more people that you surround yourself and the more diversity and awesome culture, the better. I will say, to wrap this up, that I was trying to remind myself like what I had been doing in my leisure time since finishing Lucifer, and I have to give a shout out to Canadian publishers. I've read 2 really awesome books over the last 2 years that were like romantic comedies starring like Muslim women in Toronto, and one of them was very much using like fundamental Muslim culture to create a story about Pride and Prejudice. It basically was using the Pride and Prejudice structure to tell this story, it like set in Toronto, called Aisha at Last. Totally awesome. And then a new book that just came out called the Chai Factor, about this like more like progressive Muslim family, like the young daughter being like 32 and not really being like, her grandmother being quite religious, but her mother and her being a little less religious. And it's like, it's a romantic like it's a romance novel, but like this, with this young like Muslim woman, and like she falls in love with this like barbershop, with this like guy that's part of a barbershop quartet that's living in her basement or whatever. But it's really, I think that there's this, like, the more stories that you can tell on these like broad scales. Like, I know nothing about Muslim culture from ever, like I didn't study it, but I've been consuming more and more media that is teaching me all the various things that I would never, but these are 2 very different stories, both set in Toronto with very different Muslim experiences. But because I love rom-coms and I love like human relationships, and that's my gateway in, I'm learning things in a way that I never would have before. So it's just, I just highly recommend that you, I don't know, consume as much diverse media as possible. And I just think that that's really awesome, because you become more tolerant because you learn. And it's just like, I think it's fear and the unknown more so. And that like, it gets perpetuated by so much different things. And I love that there are like, publishers had to make this a thing, and London Drugs had to make it part of their mandate that they put this book in a place that I could see it when I was looking for a book that I wanted to read. And I was like, hey, the Chai Factor, I'm going to get this book because it seems like it's up my alley. And it just like, I just think that's really cool to start to see stuff like that happening more and more. But 2 books I highly recommend. And like I say, I think they're Canadian publishers, but I think they're available internationally. So, for sure.
Cool. So The Force Awakens, the first in the sequels, 2015, directed by J.J. Abrams. What do you think?
I always forget that.
What, that it's directed by J.J. Abrams?
Yeah. That it was like this big controversial thing at the time.
Yeah.
That they were like, Mr. Star Trek man is coming in to do Star Wars.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he made Star Trek movies that felt a lot more like Star Wars movies than Star Trek. So.
I was going to say, that's why I liked the Star Trek movies so much. Because I, like, really could give a crap about the previous Star Trek's, like, franchise. But love the movies. Mm-hmm. They're, like, one of my favorite, like...
And yet you like Mass Effect.
I do like Mass Effect, yeah.
Okay.
What's wrong with that?
Well,
how are those things correlated?
The first Mass Effect game steals a hell of a lot from Star Trek.
Well, I can imagine. Yeah. I mean, okay, granted, I haven't, like, given it a ton. I just know that when my mother watched it when I was a young child, I was like, what are you watching? Why are you watching this?
Star Trek The Next Generation?
Yeah, the one with the Whoopi Goldberg. Yeah.
The one with the Whoopi Goldberg. Not to get off onto too much of a tangent right at the beginning of a conversation about The Force Awakens, but Star Trek The Next Generation is, like, I was a fan of Star Trek before I was a fan of Star Wars.
Ooh, interesting.
My dad and I used to watch Star Trek together.
Cool.
So I have the exact opposite experience from you somehow of, like... That was my jam, like, for a long time. And for a long time, I didn't like Star Wars because I liked Star Trek.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, like, when I didn't know the difference between them and was like, I have to pick one of these things. I also picked Sega Genesis over Super Nintendo, and...
It was my mom that I learned about both Star Trek and Star Wars from.
Yeah.
Because I remember my mom watching the Star Wars. It wasn't my dad. It was my mom. Yeah. And then I chose of the two things that she liked.
And if you're gonna go to a geeky movie, you're gonna go with your mom over your dad, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Your
mom's a closeted nerd.
I think this is a revelation to me. Yeah, because me and my mom went
to go see... I like that it's a revelation to you, but it's something that I learned about your mom, I don't know, 5 years ago.
Me and my mom went to go see Aquaman while my sister and my dad went to go see The Mule. How opposite could you get at Christmas time? Where, like, we couldn't convince my dad and my sister to come watch Aquaman with us. But I never thought about it because my mom enjoys...
You couldn't convince your sister to watch a movie in which Jason Momoa is shirtless for 25% of the film?
I think it was more so just that, I mean... She also wanted to just go hang out with my dad too, because we knew that it would probably be a harder sell to get my dad.
Just from what I know of your sister, that seems like a selling point.
Seems like she would enjoy that.
What was The Mule? What was that movie?
That was the Clint Eastwood movie where he's like a drug mule. It's like he's this old guy that's a drug mule.
I mean, like, if you don't want to see Aquaman, that's fine. I understand. It's not everybody's cup of tea. Clint Eastwood drug mule movie? Really?
I don't know. My dad and my sister both thoroughly enjoyed it. I hate to see it. But it's because my dad loves that kind of stuff. It's like about an old man that doesn't know how to use a cell phone, and he relates to that on many levels.
Gotcha.
And then my sister can appreciate it because she knows, like, she appreciates my dad. My sister is, like, not a nerd, right? So, like, she doesn't appreciate nerdy things. Like, she would be like, what is this Aquaman garbage? Like, there's a ratio of, like, naked men to comic books that she
would be like, are there whales pulling their trucks underwater? What's happening right now?
So confused.
Aquaman's a very weird movie. I don't know how that movie exists in the form that it exists in. God, that thing is... It's pretty awful. The Force Awakens, however, is a great movie.
Oh, so you rewatch it and you're like, this is everything I love about Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like, it just, at its core, you have these characters that... Okay, first of all, going into this, though, I have to say, The Force Awakens, and I talked about this back when it came out, was made for me. I feel like... They took a cross-section of Star Wars fans and they were like, we are going to target older millennial women and we are going to make a movie for them. Yeah. Like, actually for reals. Because everything about The Force Awakens, I feel, was made, like, specifically for me, where it's this, like... I don't know. And I know that it's meant to speak to,
the hero
like,
is a Luke Skywalker that's you.
That's me. And then there's this hot man that halfway through the movie I was like, oh my God, he took off his mask and he's this boy. And then that movie, like that scene between them, I was like, oh my God, this is so fun. And like, I shipped it immediately. I remember that being a thing.
I find that so fascinating that people, let's get right into this. People ship the two of them so hard.
Yeah.
Their entire relationship is abusive.
Well, yes, I mean, we're a terrible species.
Okay.
That's just like we tend towards.
It's
like...
just so interesting that in today's climate,
Mm-hmm.
that of all of the things that the sequels get crap for, this is not one of those things.
Right.
Like no one ever writes thought pieces about how horribly sexist and misogynist Kylo Ren's outlook. I think partially because it's supposed to be, because he's the bad guy, and we're supposed to get that like he is a very poorly developed human being.
But the thing that's the best about it is that it's literally the plight of the like young women today or millennial women or whatever.
These are the type of men that they have to deal with.
Yes, that you deal with these entitled boys who had generations of people telling them that they were fantastic. Yeah. And then they've taken this power and they've manipulated it, and then they're telling you that they're better than you. Yeah. And you're like, no, you're not. Get out of my brain, you stupid little boy, and let me tell you how the world works. Yeah. And they still won't listen, and you slash them across the face, and you leave them bleeding on the side of the road.
And then they still tell you that you're nothing the next time.
They're better than them. Yeah. And then you just have to walk away. You have to leave them there. You have to walk away. Yeah. And just be like, fine, you go pretend to rule the world, and I'm going to actually go do something with my power and make it a better place.
Not to get too much into The Last Jedi, but it's really hard to divorce these two movies from one another.
They just bleed right into one another.
But Kylo Ren's Ben's approach, his negging approach in The Last Jedi of like, I saw your parents. They suck. You suck too. I mean, like, everybody else thinks you suck. They told me. But I don't think you suck. Yeah. I think you're kind of cool, actually. Yeah. I guess a little bit. Yeah. Whatever. If you want to be with me or whatever, it's up to you. Yeah. I got all sorts of ladies if I want them. Like, that's totally exactly his attitude. But the thing that is so infuriating about it is that I watch these movies and I see that and I go like, wow, this guy is the douchiest, most entitled. I'm going to use the word prissy in, I hope that that's still an okay word to use. In this context, I think it's okay, right? I mean, like, a little bit. It's kind of on the border, right? Like but like, I mean, prissy in the sense of like,
definitely still gendered, but it's okay.
He takes his helmet off and he's like, the hair is all nicely coiffed and curled. And it's like, dude,
he's quite a pretty boy.
Yeah. Like it's, I mean it in the sense that he's very vain, right? Like he's like, his whole character is infatuated with appearances. And it's not just a matter of appearances of like, I want to look like Darth Vader. It's like, but if I take my helmet off, I better be the prettiest person in the room. Right? As opposed to Rey, who is like, although they do put makeup on her I mean, she's got makeup on her in the first movie as well, but in The Last Jedi, the really big distinguisher between her and The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi is that all of a sudden she looks more grown up. Why does she look more grown up? Because they put makeup on her. Like, they gave her eyeliner and she looks very, you've got the mug right there, and if like you turn that around, that's a tomboy.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
And then when you have her
And then in The Last Jedi, in both of her outfits, both the one from the end of The Force Awakens and then the one when she confronts Kylo, her face is very made up. But at the same time, when she ends that battle, he still looks very pretty. She looks rough. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And it's one of the things that I like about that is, and it's the same as like all throughout The Force Awakens. Mm-hmm. Like, she does not care about appearances. Yeah. It's not important to her, right? It's not a priority. Survival and utilitarianism, like all of that sort of stuff. And then like the thing that I love about Rey in relation to both Anakin and Luke as the protagonists of these three stories is the sincerity of those characters. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anakin's sincerity goes in a very dangerous direction of like he everybody starts telling him that he's the chosen one, and all of a sudden he's like I should be powerful. And it's like he's very sincere and genuine in those moments. Unfortunately, nobody around him goes, this is a problem that we should probably deal with, right? Like nobody sees fit to actually deal with this explosive that's brewing, right? Yeah. And then, but then, like with Luke, like he's very earnest, he's very sincere, he's very genuine, and so is Rey, right?
Yeah.
And like I love that through line of the protagonists of these Star Wars movies and how that ends up either being a benefit or a detriment. And it's so interesting to me where Rey's character goes, both in this and then in The Last Jedi. She's presented at several points with the choices to seize power, essentially, right? And she never ever gets as far as Luke does. She certainly never goes as far as Anakin does in what we've seen, right? The closest she gets is at the end of this movie. She's defeated Kylo Ren, and she's got that look of anger on her face. Like, she's got that Anakin Skywalker, like, I could kill you right now, look. And then it's not even like a Luke Skywalker moment of like looking at Vader's hand that I just chopped off and looking at my own robotic hand. She doesn't need a metaphor in order to look at herself and go like, this isn't me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like this is something else is pushing me in this direction. And then when we get to the beginning of The Last Jedi, and when she says to Luke, she's like, look, there's this power inside me and I need to learn to control it. I need to know what my place is in all of this. And that's it's not out of fear. It's out of respect for the danger that she's in, right? Like she looks at it and goes like, I don't want to go back to that place that I was in where I almost killed Kylo Ren. And then in The Last Jedi, when she faces him, when she confronts him again, she's a true Jedi in that moment, right? Like in all of those moments. And she always makes the altruistic right choice. It's what, like, to me, it's what makes her the true heir to the Jedi and the right person to start the new Jedi Order when Luke wasn't. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of stuff said to it too, and why I sort of say like these movies, it's important that Rey is a woman because there's something like fundamental about the like female experience, especially in this. Like Luke grew up this spoiled little boy in this. Like he just wanted to go play with his like planes and go live off world, and like he always felt entitled and like there was something to her. But Rey really just wanted to, like, she just felt abandoned and wanted to belong. She's not like she doesn't have the same sort of greed and aspiration as people that sort of are told that they should be a certain way or they could be something. She doesn't have any false aspirations.
So Luke and I wouldn't say that Luke is spoiled, but he's very sheltered.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And I
whiny.
think
I didn't mean to say spoiled. Yeah. Whiny. There you go.
But I think that the reason why they're so opposite in the way that they react to a lot of stuff is because their upbringings are the exact mirrors of one another. Luke had helicopter surrogate parents in Owen and Beru, Owen in particular, who was like, I know what happened to your father. Yeah. I know that crazy old wizard is across the desert and he wants to do the same thing to you. And I'm not going to let anybody do that to my family. Like I've been entrusted with raising you. If they didn't want you to be raised properly, they shouldn't have brought you to me. I'm going to make sure that you're safe from all danger. You're never going to leave this farm. Right? Yeah. And that's what, like, the piece that people I don't think catch when they watch A New Hope with the context of just the original trilogy, or especially just the context of A New Hope, is that Uncle Owen is like, no, I need you to stay on for one more season. You can submit your application next season after the harvest. Like, we'll talk about it then. And Luke is like, that's what you said last year. Right. And you can tell that the conversation is like, and you said it the year before that, and you've been saying that my entire life. Right. Every time everybody else was going to go do something, you said, no, you have responsibilities here. Because Owen, it's not that he doesn't, like, they've got enough money. He can hire hands. He can do whatever he needs to do. He buys 2 droids from the Jawas. Like, he can sort it out. They'll survive. They made their way with less before, right? That's not what it's about. It's about keeping Luke like on the farm, away from adventure. Whereas Rey's whole story is her parents drop her off with Blobfish Man and go, we don't care about you. Yeah. Right? And they take off. Yeah. And then from that point forward, her whole life is unwilling adventure. Right. Yeah. So she just wants some place to belong. She wants to stop for 5 minutes, right? And there's a moment with Han Solo where she sees like, oh, maybe I could belong here. Maybe this could be my family. And then he's like, well, you could be on my crew. You could be, and then like, I think she then realizes like, no, this guy's dangerous. Like this guy, Holland Rathtars, like all this stuff, like it's Han Solo. He's the rebellion general. Like there's no way that this is not more danger and death and blah, 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 everything that she's been surrounded with her whole life. But at the same time, she also ends up finding her family in those people. That becomes the most important thing to her.
I will say that one of my favorite moments in the movie, and just that is super relatable, is her. First of all, the greatest practical effect ever is that bread. Oh, so great.
So good.
But like when she's just sitting outside eating her stuff, wearing the helmet, and just sort of like that chewing, she looks so young and innocent, and it's just this perfect sort of thing where at her core she is the, like, you saw her do this super badass thing to start, but then she comes back and she is just at her core this sort of innocent girl that's just looking for a place to belong or just like living in these, and it's just like a really cool that she's very self-sufficient, but at the same time like you can tell that she wants something more. Yeah,
there's a stunted development in her that although there are these very mature, very capable aspects of her character, that is like, you're right, like there's an innocence to her, and that's where like that earnestness and that sincerity comes from, is in that innocence. And you see it again after they escape from the First Order on Jakku, and she runs out of the cockpit and Finn runs out of the gunwale, and they meet each other in the middle, and they're like, did you see that? You did so good. I can't believe we did. And like they have that moment with each other where it's like
these are just two kids that didn't quite grow up
neither
properly,
one of them deserves the life that they've been thrust into. And it's so interesting, and this is one of the reasons why I can't wait for Rise of Skywalker, is that we're going to see the three of them together for the first time. Like, so Finn, Rey, and Poe.
Oh, yeah.
And Poe is the Han Solo element.
Right,
so now we've got Luke and Leia, who are these kids who are thrust into adventure. And then you've got the seasoned
like adventurer
who's like, this guy, this is his stock and trade. It's what he does for a living, right? And that is very much Poe's character. And it's going to be really interesting to see that dynamic between the three of them and to see how Poe tempers the two of them.
Yeah.
Because we've seen how Poe tempers Finn. Yeah. And we see it like in The Last Jedi, we see more of it with Finn and Rose, and like how he kind of comes in and he's the adult in the group. Yeah. Even though he is also an immature,
terrible adult.
But he's Han Solo. He is a terrible adult.
Yeah.
Like if this is your example for an adult, you're gonna grow up to be a terrible adult. But I think that one of the things is that when we learn more about Poe's backstory, is that we will learn that Han Solo was one of his examples of an adult. I mean, like his parents were both rebellion heroes, and so he grew up with stories of Han Solo and
that's fair.
Luke Skywalker, revering them, right?
I'm excited for that dynamic with the three of them. That'll be real fun.
That's the thing that I am absolutely, without a doubt, the most excited about.
The one thing, going back and rewatching The Force Awakens after like The Last Jedi, and really is because it's always bothered me in The Last Jedi where Poe introduces himself to Rey, or where they like introduce each other, and I'm like, they would have met in The Force Awakens. And it's like, I get it that they're only together really in that briefing room scene at the very end, but it's like Rey and Poe, like, there's no way that they wouldn't have been introduced during that scene. Just because it didn't happen on camera, it just really bothers me. Where I'm like, they were both very important people to that particular discovery of Luke Skywalker's like. So location.
this is the way that I read it, is that absolutely they were in the same room together, and it was like because at the end the map and all that stuff, that all happened, but then immediately it was like the First Order knows where we are. We need to evacuate. Right? And so it was like, oh, we have the map. You have the map? go get your supplies together and get the hell out of here. Right? Like Leia was just like, go get your stuff. Like we have time for a tearful goodbye and a costume change. That's it. Right?
Yeah, fair.
You got to get out of here and go find Luke to and then find us after we evacuate. And Poe is a commander. He immediately had to go take care of stuff. So yeah, they were definitely there. And that's why when Rey at the end of The Last Jedi goes, I'm Rey, and Poe goes, yeah, I know. It's like, because Poe is saying what you're saying is like, yeah, we share the same best friend. I was there. Like, BB-8's my droid. I know who you are. Right?
Yeah.
But that's the innocence of Rey. Is she's like, we were never introduced. You don't know who I am because she's from some
that's Poe
backwater, and Poe is like, it's a military organization. You're in briefings. Like, there's a dossier about you. Like, I know who you are. Right? So that's
fine, fair. I was
and
hoping
again,
it was
Poe being
like
the
that,
adult of like, I
know.
know.
Yes.
So I like that moment of her introducing herself and then him being like, okay, nice to meet you. Like, what do I have a sign? I attract you guys?
I cannot wait to watch The Last Jedi. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
It's the thing that getting to The Force Awakens through this whole journey, I have postponed watching The Force Awakens. The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
It's just so fun.
I think that both movies are great.
They're just like nice and light.
But there's The Last Jedi goes counter, and The Force Awakens, like you said, it's like to me. George Lucas, when he made Star Wars, was basically doing his thesis on Joseph Campbell.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And the monomyth, the hero with 1,000 faces. Like that Star Wars is
like a perfect
his
like
distillation of that knowledge, right?
Yeah.
He was taking everything that Joseph Campbell wrote and putting it into one movie. And then eventually the trilogy into one story, right? And then he goes back and he does the prequels, and I feel like that was the thing that the prequels lacked the most, is that it then didn't follow the monomyth as much.
Yeah. You don't know who you care about.
So that's what made it kind of difficult to digest. But again, I'll say this until I'm blue in the face, and if I ever get to meet George Lucas, it's the first thing that I'm going to ask him is like, I see those movies and I go, these were not meant to be the monomyth. These were meant to be Renaissance era storytelling of Shakespeare essentially, right? Yeah. But Shakespeare, Chaucer, like all of that sort of
larger than life
epic
kind of
romantic, poetic sort of storytelling. But The Force Awakens is J.J. Abrams writing his thesis on George Lucas's thesis. Right? Yeah. So he's essentially writing a paper on a paper that George Lucas wrote when he was in college.
Right, yeah.
Right? And so he's taking the entire catalog of George Lucas movies, not just Star Wars, but American Graffiti as well, and the stuff that he produced, Willow, as well as the stuff that he wrote, like Indiana Jones. He's taking all of that and he's distilling all of that with a very heavy emphasis on the Star Wars part into a perfect George Lucas Star Wars movie. And he had the best guide possible to do it with, and that's Lawrence Kasdan, who wrote the two other best Star Wars movies, Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, right? Yeah. Like it makes sense that The Force Awakens is as good as it is, and that it is also again a retreading of the previous story. Yeah. But it's meant to be. I
love that about it. That's the thing, is that everybody was like, it's just retelling. Yeah. And I'm like, but in the best way. Like, they didn't have to have a trash compactor homage, but the fact that, like, who does it bother? It's great. It's fun. Like, of course. Why not? Yeah. Like,
and it's also like, if you're Han Solo and you're on a Death Star for the second time in your life, you're like, does it have a trash compactor?
Yeah.
I remember that sucked. Like, this lady deserves a sucky ending, and that would have sucked if we would have died in that trash compactor. So, like, that is a very good character moment of, like, and it's obviously a send-up. It's a reference, but...
My favorite part of this movie is just Han Solo when, like, Finn's like, we'll just use the Force, and Han Solo is just like... How am I the expert at the Force here? He's like, that's not how the Force... Like, it just...
He's so angry about it. He's so mad in that moment of, like...
Because the problem that I had is that he gets what the Force is. Yeah. And it's in that moment where he's like... Because in the beginning, right, where he's like, it's true, all of it. Like, he's been converted and he's a believer. And that's part of the thing that sucks, I think, the most about Ben is him understanding... the power and chaos and all of the like gravitas and stuff that surrounds the choices that he's been making, like on a real fundamental level. But then at a like for him to be with this little boy who's lied to him about how he got there, to just sort of say something flippant about the Force, for him to just be like, you don't even know, like you don't even understand. Anyways, it's a great, I love it.
Well, it's the funny thing about that is that, you know, the expectation is that Luke Skywalker is the new Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's not. Luke in The Last Jedi is Yoda.
Yeah.
That's why Yoda comes to him and not Obi-Wan, right? And also because it's easier to get Frank Oz to do a puppet than it is to CG Alec Guinness back to life or use Ewan McGregor and explain that somehow. But from a story perspective, it makes sense. Like Luke is Yoda. He's off in exile on a distant planet that Rey has to go find. That makes sense for the story. The character that brings her into the adventure is Han Solo, and that's Obi-Wan to Luke, right? Yeah. And so here's Han Solo finding himself dragged back into this life that he was doing his best to escape, and confronted with the reality of, like, I'm the crazy old wizard now. And it's all in that moment. It's in that line of delivery when he's like, that's not how the Force works. It's so good. And then it's immediately followed by, oh, you're cold. And it's like, you're covered in fur, right? He's like, and it's just Han Solo's idea of, like, he's just surrounded by these people that it's like, I got this stupid kid. We got no plan. And now the dog is mad because he's cold. It's like, yeah, we're all cold. It's a snow planet. I love
this movie so much.
It's so good. Fun. So the first time I saw it, I had a problem with Han Solo and the way that he's portrayed in it, right? Okay. Especially what is now my favorite scene in the movie, and it took me a little while to digest it. The moment when they're on, like, in the Eravana, which is his big ship, the whale ship. One, and the gangs are at either end, and he's doing the whole fast talking back and forth, and there's a lot of jokes in there. It's really quick, and there's like 6 jokes in like a 30-second. Yeah, and there's a couple of moments in there where I was like, this is a little bit, like, I don't know, there's something a little bit cheesy about it. And then I had the realization later on of, like, oh, I want Han Solo to be the same man that he was 30 years ago. Right, yeah. And that's not fair to that character. Yeah. Harrison Ford's not the same man that he was 30 years ago. He's still Harrison Ford, but he's grown up. He's aged. He's wiser in some ways. He's crankier in other ways, right? And that's where, like, Han in The Force Awakens is such a perfect evolution of that character, because he's at the age where he should be a grandpa, right? Yeah. And that's the moment, like, these kids are essentially his grandkids coming and bothering him, and he's like, what are you doing? Like, I had this all figured out. And he's got the great line when he sits down in the cockpit of the Falcon to blast off out of there, and he's doing everything, and Rey sits down and he's like, what are you doing? He's like, you need a co-pilot. And then the Rathtar slams onto the cockpit, and he goes, this is not how I thought this day was gonna go. Where he's like, I caught the Rathars. we caught the signal of like, oh, the Falcon, we got the Falcon back.
Yeah.
I was going to go deliver these, get paid, pay these guys off. We'd have the Falcon back, and like the sky's the limit now that we got the Falcon again. Like, and now all of a sudden he's ditching that. There's a Rathtar on the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon. There's this girl sitting next to him. Chewie got shot. These guys want to kill them. Like, this is definitely not what he planned on when he woke up in the morning and put his boots on. And that's just such a like. That's such a dad thing. Yeah. And that's the piece of the story. And that's where I say the tragic thing about the sequel trilogy, and I think where a lot of people miss out, is in the fact that there's a trilogy in between that didn't happen. And they've been intentionally dodgy about those story points, and it's to the point for me where it's frustrating, because by not telling that story they're actually doing a disservice to the sequels, because for me, I'll be fine. I know I'll be fine. I know a lot of the people that I hang out with and talk to will be fine. We'll find the things in this story and we'll infer the things that aren't there, and we'll put it together, right? But I think for a lot of the general audience, they aren't going to, like, they're going to take it for granted that Han is a different character now than he was in Return of the Jedi. And they miss the most important part of the story that happened in those 30 years. He became a father.
Right, yeah.
And then he failed his son.
Yeah.
Right? And he gave up.
Yeah.
On his family. Nope. So, like, he's a deadbeat dad in this story.
Right.
And this is his redemption story, right? It is his, in the same way that Obi-Wan in the prequels becomes an unwilling father figure to Anakin, fights it his entire life. And it's one of the reasons why Anakin meets the fate that he does, is that, like, by the time we get back to them in Attack of the Clones, it's like, oh, we're like brothers. And it's like, no. You're supposed to be raising this kid.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, yeah, but like, it's more like an older brother, younger brother thing, right? And then by Revenge of the Sith, he's like, you're not my responsibility anymore. You're a Jedi Knight. And it's like, no, you're his father. You're the closest thing to a father that he's ever had. Yeah. And you are ignoring that responsibility. And then in A New Hope, Obi-Wan has the realization of, like, this kid showed up on my doorstep. I got to teach him to be a Jedi. And this inevitably ends with me confronting Vader and paying for my mistake, right? Yeah. And you know, meeting his fate. And it's like, he was a bad father as well, and Anakin is a bad father to Luke. And the redemption of his story is going like, oh, I'll save my son. I'm gonna kill the Emperor. And Han's redemption is, I screwed up. But it's not a redemption story because most people aren't tracking the fact that Han and Leia and Ben had a whole life.
All together,
it happened, right?
Yeah.
And both Leia and Han made the wrong choices. And I mean, like you know how it went. You know how the conversation went of, like, there's something wrong with Ben. It's something to do with he's a Jedi, and Leia was like, Luke, we got to send him to Luke. And Han was like, no, he's my son. I'll fix it. Yeah. And Leia was like, no, you won't fix it. We're sending him to Luke. Yeah. And that's the reason that they split, right? Is that, like, that happens, and then it goes wrong, and then Han goes, I was right. Like, Luke couldn't solve, and then goes away, and for 20 odd years or 15 years spends the rest of his life going, like, I guarantee he every night is sitting up, like, looking at the ceiling of whatever crew quarters he's in, thinking about, I should have said this. I should have done this. I shouldn't have let him do that when he was a kid. We shouldn't have raised him in that city. We should have raised him somewhere. Like, like it's Han Solo. It's his whole, like, his whole thing. He's just double thinking everything until this kid comes into his life, this girl, and he's like, how is this happening to me again? How? And that's when he realizes, I think, like, he looks at it and goes like, I know where this is going. Yeah. We're going to go to this base. I'm going to get us on there. We're going to shut down the shield. There's no way I'm coming back. Yeah. right? Like, he knows in the same way that Obi-Wan knows, if that's no moon, that's a space station. Darth Vader is there.
This is me. Yeah.
See you later, kid. In 6 months, I'll tell you to go find Yoda. Like, Han knows. He knows by the end of this movie that he's going off to his death. Certainly, once he realizes that Ben is there and he walks out on that thing, he knows that he's not coming back from that. Like, it's a very... If 3PO were there to tell him the odds, he'd be like, yeah, I know that it's 7 million to 1 or whatever, that this is going to work. But it's his son and he has to try. And regardless, he has to be there for him and blah, 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 all that. And then, I mean, like, it's tragic the way that it happens, and it's no good. I don't want Han Solo to die, but it's also appropriate that he dies, and that he
knows. And the thing that's the most beautiful about that moment is that he knows. He was like, there was a 50-50. There was something that, and like he's not surprised by being killed by Ben.
Well, in his last act, he puts his hand on Ben's face as he falls, and it's like it is exactly that. He's basically saying like, I forgive you, son, right? And then in The Last Jedi, Luke confronting him and being like, you know, you killed your father. And he's always like, because you did that, he will always be with you. Yeah. Like, you made that choice. Like, it's that the light side is always going to be tugging at you because in a metaphorical sense, but it's Star Wars. In a very real sense, that Han Solo left an impression on Ben's soul in that moment.
Made me cry. I'm just like thinking about it, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
And that's so. Kylo Ren's always going to be conflicted, and I think that we'll see the culmination of that in Rise of Skywalker. But
and Rey's gonna jump over that thing, and it's gonna be so cool.
It's gonna be pretty cool. It's gonna be a good movie.
Excited. I get jazzed about Star Wars. It's super fun. I like really fun stories, and it just. The Force Awakens like made it like fun again, and it just like
it just came back and it just gave us what we wanted from the prequels, right? It told a Star Wars story, whereas the prequels I think were very pointedly different from the original films because George Lucas didn't want to repeat himself, right?
But you let other people now step in and do it for him, and
I mean I think that he was browbeaten into submission, But yeah, I mean, thankfully, you know, he appointed the right person. Yeah. And I think that that's the key, is that Kathleen Kennedy is the right person for this era in the same way that Kevin Feige is the right person for Marvel. And people act like Marvel was always firing on all cylinders.
No.
It wasn't until Phase 2, after Avengers, that stuff really started to kick into gear. Yeah. And even then, the first movie after Avengers is Iron Man 3, which is, to many people, one of the worst MCU movies. I don't understand that. I think it's fantastic.
Isn't Dark World also in Phase 2 or
Dark World is also in Phase 2. Oh. And there's some rocky stuff in there. But, like, throughout Phase 1 and then into the beginning of Phase 2. And it's not really until Phase 3 that it's like, in Phase 3, every movie was awesome.
But you like take some getting there, and the idea
you got to figure out what the rhythm
all
is.
All of the different things too that I think people forget about the different things that Feige like greenlit. But like Big Hero 6 is one of the greatest things I think that Marvel did over the last few. But like the idea of taking those properties and whatever, he gave it to like the 4 people or whatever. 4 people came in and he's like, you can take any back catalog you want. Yeah. And that whatever, one of them was Guardians of the Galaxy and one of them was Big Hero 6, and I forget what the other 2 were that he was just like, you can take these and play with them, and then they did, which is really awesome.
Well, I think one of them was supposed to be the Inhumans, which actually was supposed to come out last week. When they announced Phase 3, the Inhumans was in one of them. Phase 3, and it was like, I think it was like July 12th or something like that, 2019. So that movie never happened. But
you gotta know when to when to say no too. So
yeah,
it's good.
Well, I think what
Let it
happened
go.
with that is that they got the Fox stuff started happening,
Right, and then they're like,
and
well,
they went,
let's do
"Oh,
that.
we don't need the fake mutants.
Yeah.
We're gonna get the real mutants back.
Yeah.
Just put them in Agents of Shield. Nobody's watching that anyways."
Is that and that show's still happening? Which I found
It's
out
the last
because
season.
there was a Comic-Con panel, and I was like, how is there still?
Yeah, it's ending now. Yeah, The Force Awakens. Is there anything else that we need to say before we rank it?
I don't think. I mean, no. I mean, we could keep talking about it, but I think we've sort of covered all of the major bases.
I will probably come back to a lot of stuff when we talk about The Last Jedi next week.
Oh yeah, for sure, because they both feed into each other so well in a way that I really hope Rise of Skywalker does as well. And I fully am okay with people not liking these movies because I always stick to this. I was like, they weren't made for you. They were made for me. And that's my biggest like comeback to that kind of stuff. And I'm like, sure, that makes me intrinsically selfish and very Kylo Ren of me. But like these movies were made for fans exactly like me. And I just got everything I wanted out of them. So
well, that's how I feel about Solo, right? When people gripe about Solo, I'm like, what is your problem? This is a perfect adaptation of the Brian Daley Han Solo adventure stories. It's full of Easter eggs that only fans of the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels are going to get.
yeah.
Darth Maul at the end of it, it's like, if you didn't watch the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, you're like, what?
Yeah.
Darth Maul's alive? Like, that's such a surprise. But then, like, when I watch Solo and get to the end of that movie and it's Darth Maul, I'm like, oh my God, I'm such an idiot for not seeing that.
Okay, and you're like, yeah,
Like-
this is like
like-
for you. Yeah.
Crimson Dawn, like the symbol, Dryden Voss's facial scars and his weapons. It's like
right.
there are all these hints that Darth Maul is behind all of this
Right, and
the
yeah.
entire time, and you're just like, I don't really know. It's like the Pike Syndicate being involved in it, like all of this stuff. If you're a animated Star Wars fan, you should have seen it coming. But also, and like, there's a lot of reasons why it's a good surprise. But but like when you look back through the movie, you're like, there are all of these great hints at it,
Which is so cool.
which like that's only there because it's written by John and Lawrence Kasdan, who are like
they
you've
gave
got
the right
Lawrence
people to
Kasdan, who's
it,
the
yeah.
legacy of Star Wars, and you've got John Kasdan, who is a fan like we are, who wrote a Star Wars movie for fans like us, and then fans like us are the ones who crapped all over that
Yeah,
movie,
it's
didn't even
ridiculous.
bother going to see it. As I used to go and see all the Marvel movies, all the Star Wars movies with my friend Jeff. And then The Last Jedi happened, and he didn't like it. And then when Solo came around, I was like, I'm going to grab tickets. Like, do you want tickets? And he was like, no, I'm not going to go see it. And I was like, you're
Devastating.
not going to go see a Star Wars movie? He's like, no, it doesn't look good. And I was like, I think this is where we part ways. Like,
yeah.
yeah. And yeah, like, honestly, that decision, strain on a friendship. He's never gonna listen to this, so I don't have to worry about it. But like, it's rough. Like, it's like we used to have this thing in common, and I think with so many Star Wars fans, we had this thing in common, and then these last couple movies, it's like, I don't know what happened, but I think you're right. It's like these movies, like, it's not for you, and that needs to be okay. It needs to, but the problem is that those people are not okay with Star Wars movies not being for them anymore, right? They want it to just be a bunch of guys running around with laser swords and machine guns and rocket launchers killing robots. And I was like, that's not where it's at. And also, those wouldn't be good movies. Like, it's when those guys wanted to remake The Last Jedi, right? Like, there was the petition or whatever. It's like, I really wanted them
To get it, so
to
that they-
make
yeah.
that movie
And just be
again,
like, oh.
so that I could sit and watch that and go, this is an unadulterated piece of garbage. You're not a good filmmaker. You should be ashamed that you did this. The Last Jedi is a much better movie than anything you're ever going to be capable of doing. But I mean, like, they proved that point by just getting a bunch of people to sign that petition and then just disappearing. I think there was one person who, no, that was a Donald Trump thing, wasn't it? Where that guy was like, that guy went on Kickstarter and was like, I'm going to do this thing to support Trump and build the wall or whatever. And he did that Kickstarter, and a bunch of people gave him a bunch of money, and it raised like, he raised like $500,000 on his Kickstarter, and then he just disappeared with the money. And I was like, yep, that tracks. That tracks. He's clearly a Trump supporter because he just took everybody's money and ran away at the first opportunity. Had no intention of building any wall. Trump supporters and Star Wars haters they're kind of on the same level. Cool. Well, now that we've insulted a whole bunch of people, nobody that's listening to this podcast, that's it. I think we need to rank The Force Awakens in the Star Wars. Let's do it this way. Better than the prequels.
Yes.
Better than A New Hope.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Better than Empire?
Yeah. Well, yes, because we know my opinion on Empire.
Yeah.
So.
Better than Return of the Jedi.
So this is the difficult
This is where
part.
It gets tricky.
But it's having just watched them back to back, and the idea that, and I talked about this previously about not having as many connections to things in Return of the Jedi, like as much as like Leia and Han were like really cool and their relationship was really awesome. It's Luke's story and they're like all sort of around it. And I never connected with Luke as a character ever throughout the like stories. There's just something so visceral to being able to connect. So like it's why you create stories. Like it's why we say representation matters, to see yourself reflected in a way that like something doesn't. Like I don't know. There's something so relatable about The Force Awakens and about Rey and about the story that is being told in that movie, that I think that especially now, like my opinion might have been different before The Last Jedi, but knowing how much these new movies are speaking so much to me and my experience and my film going tastes and how that has evolved, and the idea of like reinforcing in a way that like as a child and loving Star Wars, I did not identify as a nerd. I did not understand that liking Star Wars made me in any way a science fiction fan. Like I just didn't equate those things. And now to be like, I relate so much to Star Wars and the community and the people and the storytelling, that there's just something unequivocal about The Force Awakens and about The Last Jedi and about these new movies that are speaking to me in a way that like as a kid the originals didn't. So for those reasons, I would say that I think the Force Awakens is better than Jedi. Yeah,
I think the key is that this is one of those things where people, I think when you do a ranking, people get riled up because they think that that once you've ranked something, that's it.
Oh yeah, no.
That's the ranking, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, it's 2019. 20 years after The Phantom Menace this year. That's where we're at with Star Wars at the moment. And in 2019, The Force Awakens, with the perspective that we have right now, with everything that's going on and how important it is and how timely the story is and the characters, and the way that it's written, the way that it's structured, it's a better movie than Return of the Jedi. And maybe that's something that will change with time, and as these other movies come out, the ranking shifts, right? And Star Wars changes. It changes with perspective.
And the biggest thing is The Rise of Skywalker has the ability to make or break these latter two movies for me, because it can change so much. Like, because we say we're talking about The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi in a way that we didn't talk about sort of Empire and Jedi together, or Empire and New Hope. Like, they're not sort of tied together in the same way I feel like this new trilogy is very much, but also we are as viewers more attuned to long form narratives now than we ever were,
to it,
right? And so they built these movies to speak to one another in a way that the original trilogy and the prequels didn't speak to each other so much in the same way. And the gaps in time between the first ones, right? Like that, you really are like this linear narrative. I'm actually really curious about the Rise of Skywalker, how far it'll jump, or if at all, because
it's a few years.
It's a few years.
Already
Okay.
said,
Okay, cool. Because that'll be sort of unique in it as well. Like the subtle things that they're doing, The Rise of Skywalker could color these other two movies, that after that it could immediately shift my whole ranking again. But for right now and for where we're going.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be like a year and a half to 2 years or something like that after The Last Jedi. So
Tatooine years or Earth years.
yeah. Yeah, I think look, my daughter's name is Cara Ray.
Yeah.
Like that, it's and that was in 2016. That was pretty immediately after The Force Awakens. That character, it's really difficult to come into something like Star Wars for a fan like myself and redefine my love of other characters. Mm-hmm. And there was a turning point for me. It's actually every year it comes up on my Facebook as a post that I made, mm-hmm. where it was after I got the actually, I don't even think it was when I got the Mythos statue. I think it was when I got there's a Kotobukiya Obi-Wan Kenobi statue that I got that of old Obi-Wan, and I remember like I got it and I put it up on the shelf with the other Obi-Wans and took a picture of it to post on Facebook, and then like had a realization and posted it where I was like, I don't think I can say that it's a dead heat, like that it's a tie between Han Solo and Obi-Wan Kenobi anymore. Yeah. Obi-Wan is my favorite Star Wars character. That took years after the prequels, and mm-hmm. that was in the midst of the Clone Wars and mm-hmm. all of that changed for me, and that character became my favorite Star Wars character. Prior to the prequels, I would have said Han Solo. Mm-hmm. Even in the midst of the prequels, it wasn't really until after Attack of the Clones, a little while after Attack of the Clones, and then really into Revenge of the Sith, where I was like, oh yeah, Obi-Wan's awesome. Because mm-hmm. he's not awesome in The Phantom Menace. He's barely in it. But then The Force Awakens comes out, and I'm like, going into it, I'm like, man, this Poe Dameron character sounds like he's going to be really cool. Yeah. But I mean, like, how is he gonna make it past Luke Skywalker and Han Solo, and how's he gonna make it past Mace Windu and like just like all Kit Fisto and like all these characters from all these other Star Wars things, and even at that point competing with characters from Star Wars Rebels like Kanan Jarrus. And like, this is the thing where I'm at now today. If you ask me who are your top 3 Star Wars characters, it's Obi-Wan Kenobi is number 1. Kanan Jarrus is number 2, who's from Star Wars Rebels, from one of the animated shows. And then Poe Dameron's number 3. Yeah. Han Solo and Luke are not even in the top 3. They like, that would be my top 5, is then you go Han Solo and then Luke Skywalker. Like, that's a big deal. Crazy that this movie had the ability to put, and then the Last Jedi reinforces that. Mm-hmm. Other people don't like Poe Dameron's story. I love it. We will talk at length about it next week. I think that his story is really, really great.
I will say we didn't talk about the best moment in this movie in the Force Awakens for mm-hmm. me is when the big wide shot of him flying through and then Finn going, that's one hell of a pilot. Like that. Yes. That sequence is just, it's beautiful. Every time it comes on, so I just have to stop and watch it.
I don't know how many times I've seen The Force Awakens at this point. Yeah. Like, I have watched that movie in bits and pieces over the last 4 years so many times that it's gotta be in like the 20, 30 range of times that I've seen this movie from start to finish. It doesn't matter. Every time I watch this movie, that scene, talking about it right now, the hair on my arm stands on end. I get the tinglies in a way that like the Battle of Hoth does it for me. Mm-hmm. And like nothing really in the prequels, I guess, but like there are moments in Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels that would be very similar. Mm-hmm. But that is actually my favorite shot in all of Star Wars. Oh yeah, it's so well done. It's so good. It's so good. And watching it yesterday,
and it's such a perfect amalgamation of the VFX and the tangibility of the acting and the set and the like. It's just
there's practical effects, there's visual effects. It all kind of comes together, and it's a great it's a great character moment for the two of them because it's this moment where Finn recognizes his friend who he was friends with for 5 minutes. Yeah. Really, while they were escaping this thing, but then like, oh man, and then when they see each other afterwards and they realize that they're both still alive, and it's so good. That's why I'm so excited for Rise. Rise is going to be so good because it's going to be the 3 of them together and that dynamic for the first time. I'm so excited for that. But yeah, I mean, The Force Awakens is my number 1. for now.
Cool.
So
Good.
It goes Phantom Menace. It just goes in reverse order.
Reverse order right now.
But next week we're going to talk about The Last Jedi, and I think it's going to break that order.
Oh, probably.
I think it's probably going to break that order. And then obviously in December we'll talk about Rise of Skywalker. But it's going to be really difficult because these movies require time to digest.
Yeah.
So I think that we're definitely going to have our spoiler cast and stuff. I don't think we're going to rank Rise of Skywalker right
later.
away.
Yeah.
I think we should wait until it comes out on Blu-ray.
I think so.
And that's when we should
can
rank
watch it a couple other times, like in our homes.
Yeah.
Make it a little bit more of an even playing field.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. But we will have other stuff to rank. We did have an email, and the subject of the email was basically the idea of the way that we're doing the rankings. When we start doing the rankings, it was from Daniel Walsh. When we start doing the rankings in January after Quiver is done, and we start doing that, it's not Star Wars ranked. Thunderquack ranked will be its own show, like how Thunderquack reviewed is its own other thing. It'll have a format and stuff, and it's actually going to have more than just myself and Amanda on it. We'll have other hosts as well, so that'll be a little bit more discussion. But we are not going to do movies as they come out. Star Wars, we're doing, it's kind of a different situation. But we're going to go back and we're going to do franchises that are already complete.
Yeah. Because it just allows us to be a little bit more like...
I'll tell you right now, the first one that we're going to do is Harry Potter.
Okay, good. I was going to say, please say Harry Potter.
Yeah, so in January, when we come back and when we start doing that show and we figure out what that format is and the way that it works.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, we're going to do Harry Potter.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. That means I can't watch any more Harry Potter for the rest of the year so that I can watch them all. Cannot remember the last time I watched Philosopher's Stone. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so excited already. I did just watch when they were on Netflix. I watched from like 6 through 8, maybe even 5. No, I don't think I watched 5. But the first 5 movies, then I haven't seen in a real long time. So I'm excited.
They're all good. So, cool. Well, that's it for this episode of the Thunderquack podcast. That's our ranking thus far of the Star Wars Skywalker saga. Thank you for listening. Of course, you can head to thunderquack.com to stay up to date with the latest in Thunderquack and check out all the other great podcasts in the network. And if you like what you hear, you can support us in I keep skipping it.
Ooh.
You can also follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Thunderquack. Is it just /Thunderquack?
I think so. Facebook.com/Thunderquack.
On Twitter at ThunderquackNet. And on
so good at this.
Yeah, and on Instagram, I think it's that Thunderquack podcast.
Yeah. You can also follow us individually on Twitter, and I'm at akonkin, AKONKIN. You can add an 86 to that for Instagram, which I will actually be using this week because I'll be at Comic-Con. I'm also hoping that I can get access to the Thunderquack so that I can be using some of their social medias as well.
And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Arkwolf, ARKWULF. And if you like what you hear, of course, you can support us in 2 ways. First, by heading to store.thunderquack.com to pick up some merchandise. I need to do some new designs and put them into that store. I haven't put anything new in there in a long time.
I'd love to get some new designs.
Yeah. And the other way is by heading to patreon.com/Thunderquack and kicking in with your monthly pledge of support. $1 gets you early access to the Thunderquack podcast. It gets you access to the exclusive Facebook group. And it's going to get you access to a bunch of random stuff from Comic-Con when Amanda's there. Yeah. So maybe some live streaming.
Ooh,
it's exciting.
I hope so.
And for $5, you can get the uncut version of the Thunderquack podcast every Tuesday on Patreon. So patreon.com/Thunderquack. Thank you to everybody who does support us over there. And that's it for this week's episode. We'll see you guys next week.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first?